Liv had seen a lot of strange things in her 3 months at the Obsidian Ridge Conservation Station. She'd seen a cub try to eat its own tail because it thought the fluffy appendage was a separate, delicious creature. She'd watched two juveniles attempt to climb the same tree from opposite directions, meet in the middle, and spend 20 minutes trying to figure out how to pass each other without falling. She'd even witnessed what could only be described as a sneeze chain reaction that went through all 8 cubs like dominoes made of fur, claws, and poor timing. But this was new. The cubs were arranged in a perfect circle. Not approximately circular, mind you. Not close enough for government work circular. We're talking geometric precision that would make a mathematician weep with joy. 8 oxmol cubs, each weighing somewhere between 80 and 100 pounds of muscle, crystalline-tipped claws, and enough bite force to crush titanium, sitting in a formation so exact you could have used them as a compass rose. Liv stood in the doorway of the habitat dome, her morning coffee halfway to her lips, frozen in a moment of pure, what the actual hell confusion. "Okay," she said to nobody in particular, because talking to yourself is perfectly acceptable when confronted with the impossible. "Okay, so either I'm still asleep, or someone switched my regular coffee with the hallucinogenic kind, or—" Kit, the smallest of the bunch with his distinctive copper-colored spots, raised one massive paw. He raised his paw like a student in a classroom. Liv's brain made a sound not unlike a computer trying to process a command written in a language that hadn't been invented yet. She blinked. Kit's paw remained raised. The other cubs sat perfectly still, their ear tufts at attention, their tails curved in identical positions. "Did you just—" Liv started, then stopped, then started again. "Are you waiting to be called on?" Kit's ear tufts perked up, and he made a chirping sound that her translator device picked up as affirmative acknowledgement, polite, waiting mode. Polite, waiting, mode. These were apex predators. These were creatures whose adult counterparts could take down prey twice their size, whose hunting strategies had been studied by military tacticians across 3-star systems, whose very name, oxmol, translated roughly to the ones who hunt in moonlight and leave only silence behind. And one of them had just raised his paw to be called on like he was in second-period math class. Liv said, because eloquence abandons even the best of us during moments of cosmic absurdity. "Yes, Kit? You have something to say?" The cub lowered his paw and made a series of chirps, clicks, and low rumbles. The translator on Liv's wrist hummed, processing, then displayed, "Motion to revise previous session's outcome based on new evidence regarding fairness in warmth provider access distribution." Liv read it once, twice. A third time, slower, mouthing, the words like maybe they'd make more sense if she could taste them. "I'm sorry," she said, setting her coffee down on the nearby equipment cart because her hands had apparently forgotten how to hold objects. "Did you just make a motion? Like a parliamentary motion?" Plink, one of the larger females with a distinctive pink patch on her nose, hence the name, lowered her head and made a softer chirping sound. The translator read, "Second the motion." "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." Mumble, named for his tendency to make quiet grumbling sounds even while sleeping, shifted his weight and chirped. "Call for discussion period before vote." Tumble. "Agreed. Discussion period warranted." Patches. "Recognition of procedural correctness." Pip, the youngest and tiniest. Can someone explain the new evidence part? Still learning big words." Oxley, the largest of the cubs. "I will explain after we hear Kit's presentation." Tux, the quiet one with black and white markings. Maintaining neutral stance until all arguments presented. Liv's legs decided to stop supporting her weight, and she sat down hard on the floor just outside the habitat's entrance barrier. The cubs swiveled their heads in unison to look at her. Perfect synchronization, like a really weird and furry dance troupe. "I need," Liv said slowly, "someone to explain to me how we got from feral orphans who bit everything, including each other, to conducting parliamentary sessions in 3 months." Kit's ear tufts drooped slightly, and he made an apologetic chirp. "Too loud? Disrupting warmth provider's morning routine? Can table motion until better time?" "No, you're not." Liv pressed her palms against her eyes. "You're fine. You're all fine. I'm just having a small existential crisis about the nature of intelligence, socialization, and whether I've accidentally created a legislative body made of predators. Please, continue. What's this about fairness in, what did you call me? Warmth provider?" "You," Plink supplied helpfully. "You are warmth provider, lap giver, storyteller, scratch behind ears person. Also teacher," Mumble added, "and friend." Something warm and possibly emotion-related happened in Liv's chest, but she pushed it aside because she was still trying to process the fact that these cubs were having a meeting. Kit stood up, not in an aggressive way, but in the way someone might stand to address a council, and began his presentation. And it was a presentation, complete with what Liv could only describe as visual aids. He walked to the center of the circle, used one claw to draw in the soft habitat floor, and created a chart. A chart. "Previous rotation system," Kit chirped, gesturing to his dirt drawing, "allocated lap time based on arrival order to morning session. However, this system advantages fast risers and disadvantages those with different sleep patterns. Pip, for example, requires more rest due to smaller size and thus always receives least lap time." Pip made a sad little chirp that absolutely destroyed Liv's heart. "Proposal," Kit continued, "is implementation of scheduled rotation system where each member receives equal time regardless of arrival order. This ensures fairness and prevents resentment that could damage pack cohesion." Tumble raised his paw. Kit nodded. "Questions?" "Does proposed system account for sick days?" Tumble asked. "If Patches has tummy hurt and misses her slot, does time roll over or redistribute?" Kit considered this. "Excellent point. Propose amendment. Missed time due to illness rolls over to next available session. Missed time due to choice redistributes equally among present members." "Second the amendment," Plink chirped. "All in favor?" Kit looked around the circle. 8 paws went up. Well, 6 paws and 2 tails, because Pip and Tux apparently had their paws occupied with balancing. "Motion passes," Kit announced, then looked at Liv with what could only be described as hopeful expectation. Is this okay? Did we do democracy right?" Liv opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "You did democracy perfectly," she managed. When did you learn to do democracy?" "You taught us," Oxley rumbled, his deeper voice making the translator work a bit harder. "Remember? 2 moons ago, when Plink and Mumble fought over the good sleeping spot?" Oh no. Liv did remember. She'd sat both cubs down, explained that fighting wasn't the answer, introduced the concept of taking turns, and used a timer to make sure each got equal time in the coveted sunny corner. "You said," Mumble added, "that when resources are limited, the fair thing is to share and rotate. You said communication prevents conflict. You said—" He paused, getting the words exactly right. "Everyone deserves to have their needs heard and their feelings validated." "I did say that," Liv whispered. "I absolutely said that." So we listened, Pip chirped proudly. We always listen to you. Tux, who rarely spoke, added quietly, You made listening feel safe. And there it was, the thing that had been happening without Liv fully realizing it. She'd been treating these orphaned predator cubs not like animals to be managed, or specimens to be studied, but like people. Small, furry, six-limbed people with claws and teeth, sure, but people nonetheless. People with thoughts and feelings, and the capacity to learn not just hunting techniques, but concepts like fairness, empathy, and collective decision-making. She'd read them bedtime stories from her childhood. She'd taught them rock, paper, scissors to resolve minor disputes. She'd praised them for sharing, for being gentle, for using their words, or chirps, as it were, instead of their claws. She'd treated them with respect and kindness, and the assumption that they could understand complex ideas if someone just took the time to explain. And they'd absorbed it all like sponges made of fur and possibility. Okay, Liv said, standing up and brushing off her pants. Okay, so we're doing this. We're really doing this. You've formed what would you call yourselves? A committee? A council? Pack, Kit said firmly. Still pack. But pack that makes decisions together. Better pack. Better pack, Liv repeated, and smiled despite the fact that her entire understanding of xenobiology was currently being rewritten in real time. All right, better pack. Since you've so democratically decided on a rotation system for lap time, who's first today? The cubs consulted their dirt chart. Tux, Plink announced. He had least time last session due to nap running long. Tux's ear tufts went up in surprise and pleasure. He bounded over to Liv, carefully, because he'd learned that humans were squishy and breakable, and settled himself in her lap with the delicacy of a creature 3 times smaller. The other cubs arranged themselves in a loose circle around her, close enough to feel included, but not crowding. Pip rested her head on Liv's knee. Kit leaned against her shoulder. Oxley's tail curled around the whole group like a fuzzy security perimeter. Story? Mumble asked hopefully. Yeah, Liv said, reaching for the datapad she'd loaded with human children's tales. Yeah, I can do a story. How about the one with the tortoise and the hare? It's about fairness and not underestimating people who seem different from you. 8 pairs of eyes locked onto her with absolute attention. 8 tails swished in contentment. 8 apex predators settled in to learn another lesson about being good people, good beings, from a human who'd never expected to become a teacher, a warmth provider, or, apparently, the accidental founder of the galaxy's first predator parliament. Outside the habitat dome, the twin suns of Oxmol Prime rose higher into the copper sky. In the station's administrative wing, Director Calpix was about to have his morning routine interrupted by security footage that would make him question every assumption he'd ever had about predator rehabilitation. But in this moment, in this perfect circle of trust and warmth and democratic decision-making, there was just a story, a human, and 8 cubs who'd learned that maybe, just maybe, there was a better way to be. Even if you had claws that could slice through steel. Especially then. The moment Liv finished the story about the tortoise and the hare, which the cubs found absolutely hilarious because why would anyone make fun of slow and steady wins the hunt? They immediately tabled their parliamentary session in favor of breakfast. Democracy, it turned out, took a back seat to food. Some things were universal across species. Liv distributed the nutrition cubes, specially formulated for growing oxmol physiology, and watched as the cubs formed an orderly queue. An orderly queue. She still wasn't over that part. 3 months ago, Feeding time had been chaos incarnate. 8 cubs, swarming the food dispenser like furry piranhas, climbing over each other, growling, snapping, treating every meal like it might be their last. Standard predator behavior, really. The kind of thing every xenobiology textbook said was hardwired, instinctive, impossible to modify without years of conditioning. Liv had looked at that textbook, looked at the snarling pile of cubs, and thought, yeah, but has anyone tried just asking them to line up? "Pip, you're up next," Oxley rumbled, stepping aside after receiving his cube. "Thanks, Oxley," Pip chirped, bouncing forward. "You're welcome, Pip." Liv leaned against the feeding station and wondered, not for the first time, if she was living in some kind of alternate reality where the laws of animal behavior had just stopped applying. The other xenobiologists at Obsidian Ridge used standard protocols, scheduled feeding at exact times, minimal physical contact, clinical observation from behind barriers, reinforcement of natural hierarchies. They treated the orphaned predators like what they were, dangerous wild animals that needed to be prepared for eventual release back into their native ecosystems. Liv's approach had been slightly different. Okay, massively different. Completely, utterly. Are you out of your mind different? She'd started reading them bedtime stories on night 2 after Pip had cried. Yes, cried, with actual tears, for 3 hours straight, clearly missing her mother. The station protocol said to let her cry it out, that coddling would create dependency issues. Liv had looked at that protocol, looked at the tiny sobbing cub, and said a very unprofessional word before scooping Pip up and rocking her while reciting every nursery rhyme she could remember from childhood. Pip had fallen asleep in her arms within minutes. The next night, all 8 cubs had crowded around expectantly at bedtime. "What?" Liv had said. "You all want stories now?" 8 heads nodded in perfect synchronization. And that had been that. Within a week, she taught them rock, paper, scissors to settle minor disputes over toys. Within 2 weeks, they understood the concept of indoor voices versus outdoor voices, or rather, inside habitat chirps versus outside habitat chirps. By week 3, Kit had accidentally used the word please when asking for a second helping of food, and Liv had nearly short-circuited from joy. The other staff members thought she was losing it. "They're predators, Liv," her colleague Tom had said, watching through the observation window as she demonstrated how to properly apologize after accidentally stepping on someone's tail. "Not puppies. You can't socialize them like they're domestic animals." "Watch me," Liv had replied. Then came the incident. 2 months ago, on what Liv would forever think of as the day everything changed, Plink and Mumble had gotten into a vicious fight over the sunny sleeping spot in the eastern corner of the habitat. And when Liv said vicious, she meant claws out, teeth bared, the kind of fight that would have resulted in serious injuries if she hadn't intervened. Station protocol was clear. Separate the combatants, reinforce the dominance hierarchy, let the stronger one claim the resource. That's how predators worked. That's how nature worked. The strong took, the weak yielded, and trying to change that was fighting against millions of years of evolution. Liv had looked at that protocol. Then she'd looked at Plink and Mumble, both sporting minor scratches, both panting and upset. Then she'd done something that would have gotten her fired from any other research station in the galaxy. She'd sat them both down for a talking to. "Okay," she'd said, positioning herself between the 2 cubs, speaking in that tone that every child in the universe recognized as, "You're in trouble, but I still love you." "What happened here?" Mumble had chirped something aggressive about territory and rights and mine. Plink had growled about getting there first and finders keepers. Right, Liv had said. So you both want the same spot, and you decided the best way to solve this was by hurting each other? Two sets of ears had drooped. Two pairs of eyes had found the floor suddenly fascinating. Here's the thing, Liv had continued, pulling out a piece of paper and a marker, because apparently she was about to give a presentation to predator cubs. This spot gets sun for about 6 hours a day, right? That's plenty of time for both of you. She'd drawn a circle, divided it into sections, labeled them with crude pictures of Plink and Mumble. This is called taking turns, she'd explained. Plink, you get the spot for 3 hours. Then Mumble, you get it for 3 hours. I'll set a timer. When the timer goes off, you switch. No fighting, no arguing, just fair and equal sharing. The cubs had stared at her like she'd grown a second head. And, Liv had added, pulling out a sheet of star stickers because she'd apparently packed those for this interstellar assignment. Every day you successfully share without fighting, you get a sticker. 10 stickers, and I'll make your favorite treat. It shouldn't have worked. Every textbook, every research paper, every expert in xenobiology would have said it was impossible. You couldn't teach apex predators to take turns. You couldn't modify hunting instincts with a timer and a sticker chart. Except it worked. Not immediately. There'd been a few false starts, a couple of timer disputes, one incident where Mumble had tried to argue that he deserved extra time because he was having a really good dream in the sunny spot. But within a week, they'd gotten it. Really gotten it. The fighting stopped. They waited for their turns. They even started reminding each other when the timer was about to go off. And then something strange happened. They started applying the concept elsewhere. Kit and Tumble had a dispute over a climbing branch? They divided time on it. Patches wanted the EE, blue toy, but Tux was playing with it? They worked out a schedule. Pip got scared during a thunderstorm and wanted comfort. The other cubs took turns staying with her, making sure she was never alone. They'd learned empathy. They'd learned cooperation. They'd learned that the strongest weren't always the ones who took everything, but often the ones who lifted others up. Liv had walked into Director Calpix's office 3 weeks after the sticker chart incident to find him watching security footage with his mandibles hanging open in shock. "What?" he'd said, pointing at the screen where Oxley was clearly explaining to Pip why it wasn't nice to steal someone's food even if you were still hungry. "Is that?" "That's Oxley teaching Pip about consent and respecting boundaries," Liv had replied, because that sentence was totally normal in her life now. "How?" Calpix had clicked his mandibles together rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation in his species. "How is this possible? We've been running this rehabilitation program for 8 years. 8 years. The best we've ever achieved doesn't immediately attack handlers. You've been here 3 months and they're being good kids," Liv had offered. "They're organizing." Calpix had gestured wildly at another screen showing the cubs arranging their toys by size and color. They're cooperating on tasks that provide no survival advantage. They're exhibiting social behaviors that even adult oxmol don't display. "Maybe," Liv had said carefully. "Adult oxmol never had anyone teach them these things?" Calpix had stared at her for a long moment. Then he'd made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob and said, "Keep doing whatever you're doing. I don't understand it. It violates everything I know about predator psychology. But keep doing it." Now, watching the cubs finish their breakfast and automatically carry their empty containers to the cleaning station, another thing they'd just started doing on their own, Liv felt that same sense of wonder mixed with mild terror. She'd stumbled onto something big here. something that went beyond one human and 8 cubs. If these methods worked on oxmol predators, what else might they work on? How many species across the galaxy were considered untrainable or too aggressive simply because nobody had tried treating them with kindness, patience, and the assumption that they could be better? "Liv?" Kit chirped, interrupting her thoughts. "Time for morning enrichment activities?" "Yeah," Liv said, smiling. "Yeah, let's do enrichment. What's on today's agenda?" The cubs consulted amongst themselves, another habit they'd picked up, this constant checking in with each other. "Obstacle course," Pip announced. "But the fun one, not the scary one." "The fun one it is," Liv agreed. And if her hands shook slightly as she set up the equipment, well, that was just because she was starting to realize that she hadn't just been teaching cubs. She'd been accidentally revolutionizing interspecies relations. No pressure or anything. The problem with accidentally revolutionizing interspecies relations is that, eventually, someone important notices. In Liv's case, someone important arrived on a shuttle at dark 30 on what should have been a peaceful morning, accompanied by an entire entourage of bureaucratic officials and enough recording equipment to document a planetary invasion. Overseer Quicksmala of the Galactic Conservation Council did not believe in subtle entrances. "Where?" she announced, her 4 arms gesticulating in 4 different directions of displeasure. "Are the predators?" Liv, who'd been summoned to the landing bay while still wearing her pajamas, which, for the record, had little cartoon rockets on them, blinked at the towering figure before her. Quicksmala's species, the Loxani, were known for 3 things: impeccable record-keeping, an obsession with proper protocol, and a rigid belief in hierarchical social structures that made military organizations look relaxed. "The cubs," Liv said, still not entirely awake. "They're sleeping. It's 5 in the morning." "Sleeping?" Quicksmala's translator somehow managed to convey infinite skepticism in a single word. "Apex predators, sleeping, at 5 in the morning, the optimal hunting hour for their species." "Well, yeah," Liv said, wondering if coffee was going to happen anytime soon. "We did story time until about 9 last night. And then Pip had a nightmare about the big bad wolf. Ironic, I know. So we had to do some extra cuddles and reassurance. They need their rest." The silence that followed could have been used to communicate with distant galaxies. "Cuddles," Quicksmala repeated. "And reassurance," Liv added helpfully. Director Calpix, who'd also been dragged out of bed for this surprise inspection, made a clicking sound that Liv had learned meant, "Please stop talking before you make this worse." Quicksmala pulled out a datapad roughly the size of a small vehicle and began reading. "I am here to conduct a routine evaluation of facility protocol compliance, standard predator rehabilitation guidelines, and adherence to established conservation methodologies." She looked up, her multiple eyes fixing on Liv with the intensity of someone who'd spent her entire career perfecting the art of the disappointed stare. "I have received reports, about irregularities." "Oh, good," Liv muttered. "The reports found you." "Liv," Calpix hissed. Quicksmala continued as if she hadn't heard. "Standard protocol dictates that orphaned oxmol cubs should be exhibiting the following behaviors by month 3. Establishment of dominance hierarchy, resource guarding, territorial aggression, and preliminary hunting drive activation." She tapped her datapad. "My preliminary review of your facility records indicates none of these benchmarks have been met. In fact, the behavior logs contain terms I have never seen in a predator rehabilitation context. Terms like," she scrolled, her expression growing more horrified with each word, "conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, democratic decision-making, and, is this a typo? Parliamentary procedure? That's not a typo, Liv confirmed. Show me, Quicksmala demanded. Show me these cubs immediately. They're sleeping, Liv protested. I do not care if they are performing interpretive dance. Show me. 20 minutes later, after Liv had been allowed to change into actual clothes and grab a desperately needed cup of coffee, the group stood outside the habitat observation window. Inside, the cubs were indeed sleeping, arranged in what had become their preferred configuration, a pile of fur, limbs, and contentment in the center of their habitat, with Pip tucked safely in the middle where she felt most secure. They sleep together, Quicksmala observed, making notes. Pack bonding behavior, that is, acceptable. Then Tumble shifted in his sleep, accidentally bumping Patches, and something remarkable happened. Patches woke up, saw that Tumble was still sleeping, and carefully adjusted her position to give him more room without waking him. Quicksmala's stylus stopped mid-notation. Did that cub just demonstrate consideration for another's comfort? Oh yeah, Liv said, sipping her coffee. They do that all the time. Last week, Kit noticed that Pip was cold, so he went and got a blanket. Yes, they use blankets now, and tucked her in. It was adorable. Adorable, Quicksmala repeated, in a tone that suggested the word physically pained her. These are apex predators. Apex predators can be adorable, Liv said. The two things aren't mutually exclusive. As if on cue, the cubs began to wake up. Not all at once in a chaotic scramble, but in a gentle wave of yawning and stretching. Oxley woke first, carefully extracting himself from the pile so as not to disturb the others. He made a soft chirping sound. "Good morning, everyone," and the rest began to rouse. "Morning already?" Mumble grumbled. "Feels too early." "Suns are up," Kit observed, padding over to the water station. "That means morning. Also, we have visitors." 8 pairs of eyes turned toward the observation window. 8 tails began wagging in excitement. "The warmth provider is here," Pip squealed, which set off a chain reaction of happy chirps and bouncing. "Please," Quicksmala said faintly, "tell me they do not call you warmth provider." "They absolutely call me that," Liv confirmed, heading toward the habitat entrance. "Among other things, I'm also storyteller, lap giver, the one who explains feelings, and, my personal favorite, the human who makes everything better." She entered the habitat, and the cubs swarmed her with what could only be described as enthusiastic gentleness. They'd learned to temper their strength around her, to be careful with their claws, to express affection without accidentally causing injury. "Liv! Liv! Guess what?" Patches chirped excitedly. "What's up, Patches?" "I had a dream that I could fly. It was amazing. I was soaring over mountains and, oh, but then I got worried because what if I flew too high and got cold? So in my dream, I flew back down to check if everyone else was okay. Do you think that means something?" Liv crouched down, giving Patches her full attention. "I think it means you have a good heart. You were worried about your pack even in your dream." "Really?" Patches's ear tufts perked up with pride. Behind the observation glass, Quicksmala's translator started making a concerning grinding noise. "Director Calpix," she said slowly, "is that predator cub discussing the emotional content of its dreams?" "Yes," Calpix confirmed, sounding like someone who'd long since given up trying to understand his own facility. "And is your human staff member providing psychological validation?" "Also yes." "This is..." Quicksmala trailed off, all 4 hands moving in agitated patterns. "This is not protocol. This is the opposite of protocol. This is anti-protocol. Inside the habitat, the morning routine continued. The cubs lined up for breakfast, still in perfect Q formation. Kit reminded Tumble that it was his turn to help clean the habitat later. Plink asked Liv if they could please have the story about the three little pigs again, because the part where they work together to outsmart the wolf really resonates with our pack dynamics. They're using the word resonates, Quicksmala whispered. They're referencing pack dynamics. They're analyzing literature. Wait until you see what happens when they disagree about something, Calpix said, with the air of someone who'd already been through this existential crisis and come out the other side. As if summoned by the comment, a minor dispute broke out. Tux and Oxley both reached for the same enrichment toy, a puzzle box that dispensed treats. I wanted to try that one, Tux said, but I had it scheduled for my morning activity time, Oxley replied. There was a moment of tension. In any other predator rehabilitation facility in the galaxy, this would have escalated into aggression, dominance displays, possibly violence. It was instinct. It was nature. It was inevitable. Tux took a breath. You're right. You did schedule it. I apologize for not checking the activity board first. Oxley considered this. However, you rarely get to pick first, because you sleep later than the rest of us. Perhaps we should revise our scheduling system to be more equitable. That's very thoughtful, Tux replied. Could we bring it up at our next group meeting? Agreed. Meeting this afternoon? Perfect. Both cubs touched noses, the oxmol equivalent of a handshake, and Oxley passed the toy to Tux. Take it for now. I can wait. Thank you, Oxley. You're welcome, Tux. Quicksmala's datapad slipped from her hands and clattered to the floor. She started, stopped, started again. They acknowledged each other's perspectives. They proposed a systemic solution to prevent future conflicts. They demonstrated gratitude and respect. Her voice rose to a pitch that made several nearby equipment panels vibrate. How? Liv, who'd been watching through the observation window, smiled. I treated them like people who could learn to be better. Turns out, I was right. This is impossible, Quicksmala insisted. My species has spent thousands of years, attempting to civilize our own predator populations. We have entire universities dedicated to the study of aggression management. We have pharmaceutical interventions, behavioral modification technologies, genetic counseling programs. The best we've achieved is a slight reduction in violent incidents. She gestured wildly at the habitat, where Pip was now teaching a new game to the others that involved passing a ball in a circle while saying nice things about each other. You did this in 3 months with stories and stickers. And patience, Liv added. And the fundamental belief that they wanted to be good. That they could be good if someone just showed them how. Quicksmala stared at the cubs for a long, long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, quieter, almost wondering. Do you understand what this means? If your methods work on oxmol cubs, they might work on other species. Species we've written off as too aggressive, too territorial, too driven by instinct. You haven't just rehabilitated 8 orphans. You've potentially revolutionized conservation work across the galaxy. Cool, Liv said. Can I get that in writing? For my performance review? Calpix made a sound like choking. But Quicksmala wasn't laughing. She was thinking, her multiple eyes distant and calculating. I need to test this, she said finally. I need to know if this is replicable. If it's just you, just these cubs, or if it's something more. Test it how? Liv asked, suddenly wary. Quicksmala turned to face her fully, and Liv saw something in her expression that made her coffee suddenly taste like lead. "We have a case," the overseer said slowly. "An extreme case. Scheduled for euthanasia next week. If your methods are truly revolutionary, prove it." Ixenthor had been in the isolation unit for 8 months. 8 months of reinforced containment, sedation protocols, and handlers who approached his enclosure with the kind of nervous energy usually reserved for diffusing explosives. 8 months of being labeled unrehabilitable, too damaged, a lost cause. He was scheduled to die in 5 days. Liv stood outside the isolation unit, reading his file on a datapad while her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped it twice. Behind her, Quicksmala watched with the cold assessment of someone conducting an experiment. Further back, Calpix looked like he was mentally drafting her obituary. "This is insane," Calpix clicked. "Liv, this animal was rescued from an illegal fighting ring? He's been trained to kill. He's attacked every handler who's gotten within 3 meters of him. He nearly tore through the reinforced barrier last month." "I know," Liv said, still reading, still shaking. "He's twice the size of your cubs, fully grown, fully weaponized, with 8 months of reinforced trauma and 0 socialization. I know. There is a 98% chance he will kill you within the first 30 seconds. I know," Liv snapped, then took a breath. "I know. But Quicksmala is right. If my methods only work on cubs, on children who haven't been ruined by the world yet, then what's the point? What about all the others? The adults who've been hurt, traumatized, taught that violence is the only language anyone speaks?" She looked up at Calpix, and her eyes were blazing. "What about the ones everyone's given up on?" Quicksmala stepped forward. "I will be monitoring from the observation station. At the first sign of aggression, we will activate the neural dampeners and extract you. But understand this, Liv. If you fail, it doesn't just mean your death. It means proving that your methods have limits, that some creatures are beyond saving." "Nothing is beyond saving," Liv said quietly. "Everyone deserves a second chance." She entered the airlock before her courage could fail her. The isolation unit was dark, cold, designed for containment rather than comfort. Ixenthor's file said he preferred the darkness now. That light made him aggressive. That everything made him aggressive. Liv could see him in the corner, a massive shape, easily 300 pounds of scarred muscle and rage. His crystalline claws had been filed down repeatedly, but they'd grown back, sharper each time. His eyes, reflecting what little light existed, held nothing but fury and pain. Every instinct Liv possessed screamed at her to run. Instead, she sat down. Not close to him. She wasn't stupid, but not at the door either. Somewhere in the middle of the space, cross-legged, hands visible and empty, and she began to talk. "Hey," she said softly. "I'm Liv. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm just here, if that's okay." Ixenthor's growl could have peeled paint from walls. Liv kept talking. "I know you've been hurt. I know people have done terrible things to you. I know you've learned that the world is cruel, and that survival means being crueler first." She took a breath. "But I don't believe that has to be the end of your story." The growling didn't stop, but it didn't intensify either. "I want to tell you something," Liv continued. "It's a story from my world, about a bird called a phoenix. Want to hear it?" Silence. No agreement, but no attack either. Liv took that as permission and began. She told him about the phoenix, the mythological bird that burned to ashes and rose again. She talked about destruction and rebirth, about how being broken doesn't mean being ended, about how sometimes the most beautiful things come from the worst pain. She talked for an hour, then 2. Her legs went numb from sitting. Her throat went dry. But she kept talking, kept telling stories, kept existing in that space with gentleness and patience and the stubborn insistence that he was worth the effort. In the observation room, Quicksmala watched the monitoring equipment. His stress levels are decreasing, slowly, but consistently. "Impossible," Calpix whispered. 3 hours in, Ixenthor moved. Liv's heart nearly exploded, but she forced herself to remain calm, remain still. He took one step toward her, then another. His movements were cautious, confused, like he couldn't quite understand what was happening. He'd been trained to expect pain, trained to deal it first. But this small, soft creature just sat and talked and asked for nothing. "It's okay," Liv said quietly. "You can come closer if you want. Or not. Whatever feels safe for you." Another step. Then another. He was 3 meters away now. 2. 1. In the observation room, Calpix was making continuous clicking sounds of distress. Quicksmala had all 4 hands pressed against the glass. Ixenthor lowered his massive head and rested it on the ground near Liv's knee. Not touching, but close. So close. "Hey there," Liv whispered, and she was crying now, couldn't help it. "Hey there, brave one. It's okay. You're safe. You're so safe." A sound came from Ixenthor, not a growl, not a chirp. Something broken and small and heartbreaking. His massive body shuddered. "I know," Liv said, slowly, so slowly, reaching out to rest her hand near his head. Not touching, just close. "I know it hurts. I know you've been scared and angry for so long, but you don't have to be that anymore. You can be something else now." Another sound, and the translator on Liv's wrist flickered to life with words she'd never expected to hear. "Story has good ending." Liv's breath caught. "The best ending, and yours can too, I promise." Ixenthor made a sound that might have been hope or disbelief or something in between. Then, with infinite care, he moved his head the smallest fraction forward until it just barely touched Liv's hand. The contact lasted 3 seconds before he pulled back, overwhelmed. But it was enough. In the observation room, Quicksmala was already on her communicator, sending urgent messages to the Galactic Conservation Council. Calpix had given up clicking entirely and was just sitting on the floor, staring. Liv stayed with Ixenthor for another hour, talking, existing, being proof that the world could be gentle. When she finally left, he watched her go with something other than rage in his eyes, something like trust. 6 months later, Liv stood in the main habitat, expanded now to accommodate 10 oxmol instead of 8, and watched what could only be described as controlled chaos. The cubs were demonstrating their conflict resolution techniques to a delegation from 5 different planetary conservation programs. Pip was explaining the sticker reward system. Kit was walking visiting officials through their democratic voting process. Tumble and Patches were tag-teaming a presentation on emotional intelligence in predator populations. And in the corner, the massive form of Ixenthor sat surrounded by the cubs, listening to Mumble read a story. The adult predator had proven remarkably gentle with the youngsters once he learned he could be. Now he served as their mentor, their protector, and, in the cubs' words, the best cuddler because he's biggest and warmest. Quicksmala stood beside Liv, her 4 arms folded in what had become a gesture of grudging respect. "The Galactic Council has officially adopted the Kensington Protocol for predator rehabilitation," she said. "Facilities across 30 systems are implementing your methods. Early results are..." Remarkable. Cool, Liv said, watching Ixenthor carefully turn a page for Mumble with one massive claw. You changed everything, Quicksmala continued. Thousands of years of accepted practice, overturned by bedtime stories and sticker charts. Not overturned, Liv corrected, just improved. By remembering that being a predator doesn't mean you can't also be a person. By believing that everyone deserves kindness, patience, and the chance to be better than their worst moment. From across the habitat, Kit's voice rang out. Question from the audience. Yes, the gentleman from the Proxima delegation? How do you handle resource disputes? Excellent question, Kit chirped. We take a vote. All in favor of demonstrating? 8 paws went up. One massive paw from Ixenthor followed a moment later. Motion passes unanimously, Kit announced. Tux, if you'll join me in the demonstration area? Liv smiled. Looks like they're handling the delegation just fine without me. They learned from the best, Quicksmala said, and it almost sounded like a compliment. That evening, after the visitors left and the cubs settled in for their bedtime story, Liv looked around at her improbable, impossible family. At 8 cubs who'd learned that democracy worked better than dominance. At one scarred adult who'd discovered that trust was possible. At the evidence, living and breathing, and occasionally voting on important issues like snack distribution, that kindness could revolutionize the galaxy. What story tonight? She asked. The 3 little pigs, came the unanimous cry. Liv laughed. You realize you're all technically the big bad wolf in this scenario, right? Ixenthor made a rumbling sound that the translator rendered as, But we learned better way. We learned from you. No, Liv said softly, settling into her spot with cubs and one very large predator arranging themselves around her. We learned from each other, and she began. Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs. Outside, the twin suns set over Oxmol Prime. Inside, a human read a story to predators who'd learned that the sharpest weapon wasn't claws or teeth, but compassion. That the strongest weren't those who dominated, but those who lifted others up. That democracy, kindness, and the revolutionary act of believing someone could be better made all the difference. Even if you had to take a vote on it first.